You're joining us today for GovInsider Live Studios, where we talk to brilliant global government innovators from across the world. Today we're talking about lessons from the cyber battlefront, and joining us is the president of the Singapore's Computer Society Cybersecurity Chapter, who also has a storied career in government. Welcome, Xiaofei Huang.
Hey, thanks, Josh, for having me. Great morning. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Let's start by talking about some of the risks that you're seeing out there on what you describe as the cyber front battlefield. What are some of the risks that our viewers at home should be watching out for?
Right, Josh. I think every one of us are probably working from home with this COVID-19 situation right now. And in fact, one of the largest risks that we see right now is actually malware and phishing email messages. In fact, Google, in a news article just a few days ago, stated that it was detecting 18 million malware and phishing Gmail messages per day related to COVID-19. And this is on top of the 240 or so million COVID-related spam messages, according to Google's report. So this is very worrying because all of us are working from home, right? And sometimes we have to get our work done with our email and so on. So phishing is really a large threat right now. The other risk I see is really what we call business email compromise. So you know, with the lockdown situations, a lot of the companies they are applying for government grants. They are talking to their suppliers and negotiating with sometimes contractual delays and so on. And a large part of this is about money. And sometimes you will see business email compromise situations where people, we're going to talk about this later about social engineering as well. So sometimes you deceive the recipient as somebody who is very senior in the organization and trying to negotiate a financial payment to a supplier, for example. This is what we call business email compromise. And I think there are a large number of these kind of attacks going on. And the tricky thing about business email compromise is that no malware is involved. You do not download viruses. You do not download any software. It is purely social engineering. I tell you, I email you. I tell you that your supplier, I need your help. Can you give me a payment for the time being, just to keep my cash flow going? And that's how the attack happens. The third risk I would say is actually we are now looking at addressing all the immediate problems that we have with the COVID situation, like employees trying to work from home, provisioning equipment, and basically functioning like a help desk to help the employees work from home. But on a larger scheme of things, we are seeing some companies who are squeezing the cyber security and IT budgets. They are even deploying cybersecurity personnel to do work that are not cybersecurity related. For example, they could be redeployed to performing other functions, and this is kind of worrying because, as I mentioned, cybersecurity incidents are not on the down, not going down, and you need cybersecurity resources and personnel to respond to those incidents, even more so now than before COVID.
And let's talk about social engineering. You've mentioned
Sure.
that. But what do you mean by that? How could social engineering be used to create a cyber threat?
Yeah, so social engineering is very interesting because it is not a technical hack or it basically takes advantage of human traits, like curiosity, fear, and concern, and particularly during this COVID period, all of us are concerned, right? So if I'm a malicious actor, I will take advantage of that human trait that you are concerned about COVID, you are fearful of what's going to happen to you or your family during this pandemic, and I can actually persuade you as a victim to either click or download an app, or to open a file, email attachment, and this is a really a big thing because it is not just through email. We are seeing what we call SMS phishing or smishing in short. I can I think we have seen an example of this about a month or so ago, when you see fake SMSs that are impersonating as SingPost, the Singapore Post postal service, to say that you have received a package. Now, what if I told you that actually it is a package from the government that is a COVID-related something, and you will fall for it. So that is why social engineering is, I would say, is a very dangerous channel to cyber attacks. It can't be prevented. You will always see this kind of actors going around taking advantage of this.
So what can we do to minimize that risk?
As I said, this is not a technical problem. It's really about cybersecurity awareness. So the government in Singapore has done quite a fair bit in terms of educating the public on this. And most recently, we have IMDA, who has instituted, a country code indicator on phone calls that come from outside of Singapore. So you have a plus symbol in front of the phone number. So this helps the public actually understand and identify what are possible scams. And really, this is not just a cyber attack. It is a combination of both the social engineering as well as the cybersecurity technical attacks. So this is really, you need to have more awareness. You need to educate the public, and they need to know what to do in case they fall victim. Who do they call? And how do they respond to these social engineering attempts?
We are live now on Facebook Live, so if you have questions, please put them in the comments section for us, and also please help us by sharing this on your profile so we can reach and educate a wider audience around the cyber threats. Xiaofei, you mentioned remote working is a particular problem in cybersecurity. Why?
Yeah. Well, before COVID, some of the companies, they are already using remote working as a norm, but for most of the organizations, including a lot of the government agencies around the world, they don't work remotely. So you are confined to behind the enterprise perimeters, and you for the IT teams, for the cybersecurity personnel, you have a sense of visibility. You're able to see the attacks going on, and you're able to do something about it because the equipment are managed and monitored by the enterprise IT infrastructure. But when you work remotely from home, there are a couple of new vectors, if you like, for potential attacks. The first and most important one is the home Wi-Fi, right? So when you work from home, you have to use your home Wi-Fi, and the home Wi-Fi is not managed by the organization that you work for. It's managed by you or your family member. And I will tell you a personal story, Josh. So for me, I can't set a very complex password in my home Wi-Fi because my kids will complain that it's so complicated they can't log in. And I'll be the help desk most of the time, 24 hours to respond to this. I'll be the help desk in the home. So the tendency will be for me to set a simpler password and to make my home Wi-Fi easier to use. But the downside of this is it will be less secure. Now, the second problem is, what if you use your own personal equipment, for work purposes, right? So at home, you're not confined to just using the company PC or the company laptop to do your work. You can use your phone, you can use your iPad or what have you. And those devices are not managed by the enterprise or the organization. So back to my point about visibility is that you lose visibility of these potential threats and incidents that might be targeting your organization, but are happening outside the perimeters of the organization. And that is really a big concern for cybersecurity, I think.
And I note in the past you've also warned of cyber fatigue.
Yeah.
What's this, and what can we do about this, especially as we're working remotely with more of these threats constantly coming in?
Josh, the cybersecurity is such a huge topic that there's no chance on earth that you are able to bring the risk to zero. But a lot of the organizations, they work on the premise that, we control what we can control, we control what we can see. And therefore, they try to keep up with the latest attacks. So they try to update all the operating systems and the devices with these patches on a regular basis. But now with the COVID situation, working from home, with the devices outside the organization boundaries, how do you do that? It's a Sisyphean task to even know which are the devices that you are basically responsible for, because as I mentioned, Josh, some of the equipment do not belong to the organization. So today's security updates fixes the problem that appeared yesterday. It's not you're already behind the times when you implement a patch, and that's why you have a sense of fatigue. The cyber fatigue is that, if I'm always behind the curve, I might as well just give up instead of trying to stay ahead of the malicious threats that are going on out there. At the individual level, at the employee or the personal level, is that cyber fatigue means that we could also mean that we are constantly being forced trying to be forced to use complex passwords or even different passwords for different email accounts. We are told that we cannot do this, we cannot do that with our enterprise PCs and accounts. I think there's good reason for that. But when you work from home, sometimes you just don't have a choice. You make certain choices, but sometimes those choices you might just fall into the trap that I'm just tired. I'm just tired of all those controls that my organization places on me. I can't work like this. So you tend to take the shortcuts, and that is why it is a problem, right? I think the solution to this is really to help the employees, the personnel, do their work, understand what do they require, and then you try to educate them what are the risks, so that they can make an informed choice of what to do.
And many of our viewers are leaders in government or public service organisations, and they will of course be deeply worried about the security of their data and their critical infrastructure systems as well. What would you recommend that those folks in government be doing to ensure that they're creating safe and secure organisations?
That is really a interesting one. I think especially during this period, we are seeing change in the business as usual way of doing work. We tend to use a lot more of teleconferencing solutions like Skype, and most recently, the entire security fiasco about Zoom. You just have to understand what are the kinds of information that you are allowing your employees to handle, and to develop policies around them, rather have a blanket policy to say that employees are not allowed to do this, not allowed to use Zoom, for example, for all. We have seen that a lot of times, the employees or the workers, the remote workers, they just don't have a choice. They have to have something to use to get their work done. The second one is actually about, as I mentioned earlier, the IT teams in your organization. Before COVID, even for peers that I've been getting in touch with, I understand that IT teams have all been deployed to quickly provisioning equipment and to help the remote workers quickly get up to speed when they go back home and start to work, right? I think a lot of the attention right now has to shift from the provisioning now to actually taking care of all those risks that I mentioned earlier on. First we actually have set up the infrastructure to give access to all those remote workers. Now we have to think about how are we going to control the risks that are coming up, not just in the short term, but the longer term when I think this is going to be the norm for some time. It's not going to go away like next month. So I think that is an important thing that we need to do. Third and lastly is education and awareness. I can't stress this well enough. A lot of the IT teams, a lot of the organizations, they focus on buying solutions, listening to vendors, for example, to say that we have the best solution to help you secure your network, secure your information. But really, I think the most important part is educating and increasing awareness amongst the employees to know what they are dealing with in terms of the threats, to let them know what their responsibilities are, and also to actually use them as your eyes and ears to see when things are happening outside the office environment. A large part about it is visibility as well, right? You only see what you see. In the enterprise in the environment, you are able to monitor, you are able to see, but at home, you don't have the visibility. So if the staff, notices something wrong, something fishy, the computer is acting funny, and I get an email telling me that this person is the CEO of the organization. He needs somebody to call, right? But if he doesn't even know who the IT help desk or the person to call is, I don't think it's going to address that incident fast enough, lah.
And how do we solve the Zoom issue, as it were? People like to use it, but there are worries about the security of some of these software types. What's your take as a leader of an organization in how you find that right balance?
I think we have to be pragmatic about it. Okay, some of the organizations they basically just ban Zoom, but we found out later on that some other teleconferencing apps are also vulnerable in their own way. So there's really no perfect solution out there, right? So I think you have to be able to understand what the vulnerability is. You need to be able to make a call, a strong technical call in terms of what, as an IT team, you should put in place to make sure that even if something bad happens with that teleconferencing client, right? How do you actually control or contain the risk? So, for example, we have seen, the what do you call it, the Zoom bombing attack, something like that, right? You have people who are not a participant of the meeting and coming into the conference. So some of the things that Zoom has actually introduced later on, like putting them in a different waiting room and all these things, I think those are things that we learned along the way, and they are going to improve. Zoom has done a lot in terms of improving the security control, so we should give some of these solutions a chance. But I think what I think is that you must be pragmatic. You cannot have a blanket solution or a blanket ban on some of these tools. Basically, you need to listen to the users, and what works for them, you need to find a way to let them use. But if it is against your company policy to have some of these tools deal with very, very sensitive information, then you probably have to have a different solution, just different software.
Let's change tack now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about high-tech cybersecurity. So I'm hearing more about AI, about biometrics. What are the ways that this high-tech stuff is being used to keep us secure at the moment? And what's your take on how it can be used as well?
High-tech is also hype-tech. Hype. Yeah, but well, I would say that first of all, let me talk about AI. I think it has really been a huge topic even before COVID, particularly for cybersecurity, because we have incident response teams that are very small, and we have organizations that do not have the same budget as large enterprises to invest in incident response teams. So a large part is using AI to automate some of these playbooks. I call it playbooks. Playbooks basically mean like the situation I mentioned, Josh. If an employee discovers an incident, logs a ticket, and reports the incident, right? You probably will be hoping there's a human on the other end, reading the email or responding to it straight away. But that doesn't happen in the real world unless you have a huge security budget that most organizations do not have. So AI is really one of the things that will help automate some of these playbooks and orchestrate the response. Biometrics is a very interesting area because, as I mentioned, social engineering is one of the things that we are worried about, and most of them target passwords. Goes back to my point about cyber fatigue as well. Since you make it so difficult for me to use my systems setting, you have a policy to say that I need to have 12 character passwords. 12 characters with a mixture of capital letters, lowercase letters, symbols is so troublesome. So I just set one single password for all my Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you, and that is the vulnerability. So instead of these passwords, right, actually biometrics holds the key to what I call passwordless authentication. It sounds like science fiction, but in fact, passwordless authentication really reduces the chance for security and credential risk, because I think we are already seeing examples of biometrics being used. Even on my laptop here, I use my fingerprint to log on, on top of my password. I hope you improve later on to do maybe my retina scan, I don't know. But I think biometrics is really something that we will have to adopt to actually address the cyber fatigue issue, to also to counter some of the social engineering methods that I've described earlier on in this interview.
And let's talk now finally about the new normal. We're all talking about it. We could be working remotely for a long time. We could be working in totally different patterns if a vaccine to COVID-19 doesn't emerge in the next few months.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the cyber threats? And what are the sort of cyber trends that you envisage around this new normal?
Josh, I think the threats will increasingly focus, or even as we are seeing right now, they are focusing on the user. The target of the attacks are no longer the large infrastructures. They are looking at the weakest link, perhaps the users, and they are using COVID-19 as they used COVID-19 as a thematic lure to actually entice users to do something stupid, for example, to click on a link, to read a certain message, open a PDF. And yeah, so a lot of the endpoint solutions like antivirus software and all these things, they are good. They help address the situation, but you can't enforce the user, the employee, to install good antivirus software on their own laptops. Who's going to pay for it, for example, right? The second point is about perimeter defense. Now, before COVID-19, a lot of the organizations, they have large, high walls guarding their infrastructure. But now, with working from home, that perimeter is no longer there, or you think it's there, but a lot of the users are already probably sending emails with confidential information to and fro their Gmail account or their 365, and you don't have sight of all those things. So the new normal is no longer the normal that we used to know before COVID-19. The adversaries, the threat actors, are getting more and more. Well, they were smart. Now they're getting even smarter. They are sharing information with each other. And that's what a lot of organizations on the other side, the good guys, they don't do as much or as well. We don't really share information among organizations as to what kind of threats are we looking at, what threats are we seeing, and that really is a disadvantage to the guys who are trying to defend the systems, because you do not know what are the threats. And it makes it even more difficult when you have virtual perimeters, cloud, right? With working from home, remote working, I would say 80% of the things we use are on the cloud. But who is securing the cloud for us? Is the guys like AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud, Microsoft. They manage the cloud, right? So we are entrusting our information to them, right? But how do we know at the personal level? How do we know that they are actually safeguarding the information? That is something that I'm also very worried about. Virtual perimeters, where does my information stop? I mean, even today when I use my computer, I do not have a sense whether the information is actually just on my laptop or is it also on the cloud. Sometimes it is both, So that is something that is, to a cybersecurity guy like me, I'm worried. The next thing, the trend will be that fraud, financial fraud, right? So when you have, previous to COVID-19, you have maybe less people using online services, online banking services. I like to imagine that, now with the remote working COVID-19, people are using more digital services, but it is also a huge opportunity for fraud. But can the companies, for example, financial institutions, actually pick up these fraud cases or potential fraud cases using the analytics on just their physical bank accounts? So the fraud analytics, this goes into the space of data analytics. Fraud analytics probably has to be part of the cybersecurity strategy, so that when you are monitoring the traffic, you're also monitoring some of these fraud indicators, and then you'll be able to see whether, because you're addressing different situations. The users, your customers, are accessing the services perhaps differently before COVID and now with COVID. Next one, it's really a huge topic, Josh. So the other trend I would say is actually we are, even now, just a few weeks ago, we have seen a large telco services provider in Singapore, even during this remote working period, failing to provide their service for hours. Huge impact because they had to fall back to using their other services or even using personal hotspots to connect to their remote remote email accounts. So I think going forward, there will be increased emphasis, or at least I see from the adversary point of view, that you need to secure access to some of this macro infrastructure. Macro infrastructure meaning to say that the internet backbone, the things that provide it. I think internet access today is as crucial as water, as electricity. We cannot have a situation where there's no Wi-Fi, for example. I mean, my kids will complain for sure. I'm not sure I will complain because I don't need to work, but it's a big thing, I don't think we have been looking at that seriously enough, at least from organizations' point of view. The other one is actually, I thought a lot about all these cybersecurity things that actually, well, for a large organization with large security budgets, you can think about all these solutions and you can get your teams to work on it. I think the largest surface area of attack today, is actually the companies, the smaller companies that make up the supply chain. For example, you are a big organization, right? So you have contractor or outsourcing service providers that are smaller companies that provide a certain service. For example, web hosting, creative house or whatever. So these companies, they do not have the same kind of large budgets to do cybersecurity. But do they need to have help? Do they need help to actually secure the way they work, the way they run their business? Of course they do. But what kinds of avenues do they have, So I think one of the trends going forward is probably some of the security services today may have to come together as a security as a service. Security products will have to come together as offering, an affordable offering to smaller companies, smaller organizations to provide security as a service. For example, incident handling, installing some of the patches, rather than having to come out with a budget to actually hire somebody to do the work. Of course, it would be best if they have, but I think from a perspective that the organizations do not have enough budget already with this COVID situation, I think this is one of the trends.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. Everyone stay safe out there, and we really appreciate it. Xiao Fei.
Thank you.
GovInsider Live Studios is brought to you in partnership with Micro Focus, and joining us right now is Neil Pandya, cybersecurity specialist for Asia Pacific and Japan at Micro Focus. Welcome, Neil.
Hey Josh, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing good, all things considered.
And let's talk data, because that's one of the issues we're hearing a lot about. How can agencies keep their data secure?
What a timely question. Look at all the data that we're collecting about citizens at the moment, where they're moving around, and what an important measure that we've had to take to ensure the safety of people, that to protect lives. We're collecting all this data to make sure we have the right information. We can do the right analysis on where people are moving around, positive cases of COVID, where we've seen occurrences of that. So government agencies actually have had an initiative for some time now. If you look at the Smart Nations Initiative, it's all about data governance from our perspective. It's all about how you handle that information, how you share that information, how you access the information. There's a play of identity, how we use to make sure that the right people have access to the right kind of data, and we have the right levels of control on how we access the information. Also, how you share that information. So around, to answer your question about how we can help agencies with data security, the Smart Nations Initiative is really good. And the good thing is Micro Focus adds a lot of capability around the Smart Nations Initiative. The data governance part is something that's very, very close to our hearts. And we've been helping organizations with things like data privacy, data compliance for a number of years. So if you think about having to encrypt data, having to classify data, structured, unstructured data, we play a big role in that. And I'm really glad that there's an initiative with government like the Smart Nations. So it's a really good step forward.
And how does Micro Focus help agencies across the world mitigate their cyber risks?
Well, mitigating cyber risk is a key part of what we do on a daily basis at Micro Focus. So what we do is we look at this as a layered approach, if you like. And identity is a big part of that. So that's all around identity governance, how we administer your identity, how we do the life cycle of your identity from when you join an organization to when you leave. That's all about identity governance. But what about access management? So we have capabilities around access management, what you have access to. And we put a lot of machine learning around all of this as well. And then this data governance part, discovery of data, governance of data, right from collecting to disposal, archiving, all of that, we do that. The kind of controls we need to protect data, whether it's encrypting, whether we need to master data for development and testing environments. So we have a lot of capabilities around that. Then we look at application security. So this is another area of cyber risk. Are you developing applications securely? So we have capabilities that look at the whole software development lifecycle and make sure you have the right security controls to mitigate risk in your applications. But we don't just stop there as well. Okay, we look at things like the overall monitoring of your infrastructure. We collect events from different logs, and we do security event called real-time correlation. And that's really important for us because we can give you real-time threat detection into the events that we are monitoring. And believe it or not, there's another layer above this, which is the machine learning and the AI as well. So we do a lot of analytics, and it's unsupervised machine learning that gives us new insights into what we're seeing. So we look at cyber risk and addressing cyber risk as a layered approach to that, depending on where you are in your maturity and what your requirements are.
And let's talk about that further. What are the big trends that you're seeing in cybersecurity, and how does some of this new technology help with that?
You know, tech is playing a real big part in this. I have to really, tell you that some of the advances that we've seen in technology, if you think about the speed at which we can process information now, the compute power that we have today compared to many years ago, it's really, really allowing us to protect information at very, very different layers and really improving our cybersecurity capabilities. So now enhances in storage technologies allow us to protect information even at the storage layer with much, much more greater capabilities. Also, what that's allowing us to do is to improve some of our skills as well. Look at data science. Because we can compute and do analytics at a greater pace because we have that compute power, our skills around data science have improved as well. So we can apply a lot of mathematics to the events that we collect. We can get new insights. We're seeing areas around machine learning and AI, unsupervised machine learning. So we can look at things like, inside a threat. We can apply mathematical models to that to understand behavior. These are some of the things that we couldn't do before. So technology is really playing a big part in this, but it's also the maturity that we're seeing as well with enterprises. A lot of the enterprises now are maturing to a level where they can really appreciate the technology that's available to them today that wasn't around before.
And we're all, of course, working remotely as well. How can organisations adapt to this new world of remote working and make sure we stay secure out there?
Well, that's a very good question. And I really want to say hats off to all the agencies and tech companies, and Micro Focus is one of them, who stepped up. So to help you and I work remotely and everybody else is working remotely, and to reduce the risk factor, a lot of tech companies have offered promotions, the use of their technology for free. And Micro Focus was one of those tech vendors who said, look, we're going to put our hand up, we're going to exercise our civic responsibility here and make sure that if you need people to work remotely, whether you're a customer of Micro Focus or not, we're going to help you. So the first thing we did was we have technology that allows access of authentication, for example. So this is your multi-factor authentication, your one-time password. So we allowed companies to use this for free. We also allowed companies to use our encrypted email service for free as well. So it's a plugin to O365. So all it means is that the content that you send through emails, now that you're working remotely, is going to be encrypted. And other areas that we've helped organizations on in as well. So I think remote working has introduced some challenges around security. And we've been, like a lot of other technology vendors, we've put our hand up and said, look, we're here to help you. And we want to make sure that during this time, you can safely allow your employees to work remotely and carry out their responsibilities.
And many of our viewers are curious about insights into the future. What are some of the trends that you're seeing? What excites you at the moment?
Oh, wow. This is especially areas of cybersecurity. I think we're seeing areas where we may have overlooked previously. Previously we thought everyone's going to go into the office and they're going to work there. Now we're seeing different trends, right? We're seeing that, okay, people are working remotely, they need to access information, they need to, so we need to have a more deeper level of monitoring. We need to have better controls around the information that we want to protect and also how that information moves around. We're also looking at platforms that are a lot more agile. and a lot more resilient to remote working as well. So in terms of the kind of trends that we're looking at post-COVID, I think those are areas that really excite me, is how are we going to apply security. You mentioned earlier about the technology enhancements that we're seeing. That is available to us. A lot of our enterprise customers haven't really embraced digital transformation. I think they're going to be encouraged to do that, post-COVID, because one of the things that we've seen that the customers, the enterprises that had embraced digital transformation have seen a reduced impact as a result of remote working and so on. So I think we'll see an uptake in that. But security really does drive digital transformation. So I'm quite keen to see what areas of cybersecurity are embraced in that process. And Micro Focus is a big role in that one. Yeah.
And one of the trends that we're seeing is around DevSecops. Perhaps you could explain what is DevSecops and how can that help keep us safe out there?
I think DevSecops is going to play a big role post-COVID-19. We're going to be looking at applications and how we develop applications so they're suitable for remote working. I think that's going to be the standard. So so everyone's going to now have a mobile app for every app that they have in-house. So I think, and all the things that we need to make sure that those applications are developed securely right from early on. You may have heard of the term shifting left. So by shifting left, we mean, we test earlier, and it's not just testing the functionality of your code, but it's also testing the security of your code as well. So that's shifting very, very early on into the software development lifecycle. And Micro Focus has a lot of capabilities around how we develop secure applications. Now, what we're also doing, looking forward, is how we integrate the development of applications using our application security testing, but other areas of like how we protect data. So we're trying to weave those capabilities into the application security development as well. So we security develop applications, but also the data that you need to protect can also be, those capabilities can also be weaved in, because we do have a lot of very strong capabilities around how we protect data.
And final question, if folks want to work with Micro Focus, if they want to learn more from you, what should they do?
First of all, a great place to start is our website. We've got a lot of information on there. And actually around security, we've got two really good channels on YouTube. There's a SecOps channel, which is really SecOps Unplugged, and there's Fortify Unplugged. So, if you're interested in application development and you want to learn about how you develop applications securely, we have a Fortify Unplugged YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. You'll get a lot of useful videos. Now, the SecOps Unplugged is very, very interesting, especially if you're into security monitoring, cybersecurity. That has a lot of good information, and there's some very good information on machine and human teaming, which is all based around machine learning and how we leveraged machines to help us, especially around cybersecurity. It's based on the analytics we have, the mathematical models that are used to understand behavior and understand risk. So that would be a good place to start as well. And we have a presence in many of the Southeast Asia cities, the main cities in Southeast Asia. So we can always call on one of our reps and we can go through some of the offerings that we have.
I'll be sure to check out that YouTube page. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Take care,
Thanks,
Neil.
Josh. You take care now. Bye-bye.